The echo chamber in the small town of Millfield. There stands an abandoned sanatorium on Blackwood Hill, its limestone facade weathered by decades of neglect. Locals call it the echo chamber, not for its acoustics, but for what they claim happens inside, how it seems to echo one's deepest fears back at them. I never believed in such stories until I inherited my grandmother's house in Millfield after her passing. While clearing out her attic, I found a journal wedged between floorboards, its leather binding cracked with age. Inside were meticulous entries from my grandmother's time as a nurse at the sanatorium in the 1950s. The entries started professionally enough, patient records, treatment notes, but gradually transformed into something disturbing. She wrote about room 217, where patients reported hearing whispers that knew their secrets. About Dr. Merrick's experimental treatments conducted after midnight. About patients who went in with minor conditions and came out hollow-eyed, speaking of the faces in the walls. Most disturbing was her final entry dated October 17, 1958, "They're closing the facility tomorrow." Official reason, budget cuts. Real reason, what happened to the Jenkins boy? What we all saw. What we all pretended not to see. God forgive us. I might have dismissed it as the ramblings of an overworked nurse, except for the newspaper clipping tucked inside the journal's final pages, a small article about a 10-year-old boy named Timothy Jenkins who disappeared during treatment. The case was never solved. My curiosity piqued, I began asking around town. Most people changed the subject immediately. Some blessed themselves. One elderly man at the local diner leaned in and whispered, "That place breathes, you know. It inhales at sunset and exhales at dawn. Whatever you do, don't be inside when it takes a breath." I laughed it off, but the man's eyes held no humor. "They built it on the old Millfield burial grounds," he continued. "Disturbed over 200 graves. Some things don't rest easy when disturbed." Despite these warnings, or perhaps because of them, I found myself driving up to Blackwood Hill one crisp autumn afternoon. The sanatorium loomed against the darkening sky, more massive than it appeared from town. No trespassing signs hung limply from a rusted fence I easily stepped over. The main entrance was boarded up, but a side door hung partially open, its lock long since broken by other curious visitors. The air inside was stagnant, heavy with the sense of mold and something medicinal that had seeped into the walls. My flashlight beam caught dust particles dancing in the air as I moved through the reception area. Patient intake forms still lay scattered across the floor, their edges curled with moisture. A wheelchair sat abandoned in one corner, as if its occupant had simply vanished mid-transport. I consulted my grandmother's journal and followed her descriptions toward the east wing, where room 217 would be located. The hallways grew narrower as I walked, the ceiling lower, though I told myself it was just an architectural quirk. Room 217's door was unmarked except for a small metal plate with faded numbers. It swung open at my touch, hinges silent despite decades of disuse. Inside was a Spartan space, a bed frame without a mattress, a nightstand, and a single chair facing the far wall. What drew my attention was the wall itself, covered in small scratches that, upon closer inspection, formed words. Hundreds of words, scratched by fingernails or some sharp implement, I can hear them in the pipes. It knows what we did. They're still underneath us. Help me. I ran my fingers over the scratches, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air outside. Something about the room felt wrong, the proportions slightly off, corners not quite meeting at right angles. And then I heard it, a soft whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Hannah. My name. A name I hadn't told anyone in town. I spun around, heart racing. Who's there? Silence answered, but a different quality of silence than before, expectant, listening. I consulted my watch, 6:17 p.m. Sunset would be soon. Remembering the old man's warning, I decided it was time to leave. I turned toward the door, only to find it closed. I hadn't closed it. When I tried the handle, it wouldn't budge. I pulled harder, then slammed my shoulder against the wood. Nothing. It was as if the door had fused with its frame. As panic set in, I noticed the temperature dropping rapidly. My breath fogged in front of me, and the scratches on the wall seemed to writhe in my flashlight beam, rearranging themselves into new words. Timothy is still here. A child's giggle echoed from somewhere deep in the building, followed by the distinct sound of small, running footsteps in the corridor outside. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling. "Is someone there?" The footsteps stopped outside my door. A small shadow appeared in the gap beneath it, too small to be an adult. "Are you lost?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. A voice answered, high and sweet but with something wrong beneath it, like multiple voices speaking in unison. "I'm not lost. This is where I live. Where they put me." "Timothy," I whispered. The shadow moved, stretching impossibly as if the child were growing taller. "Dar. Merrick said I was special. That I could help the others. He put me in the walls." My flashlight flickered, then died. In the sudden darkness, I heard a wet, sliding sound, like something pulling itself across the floor. "Your grandmother knew," the voice continued, no longer childlike. "She watched. She helped hold me down." Cold fingers brushed against my ankle. I screamed and scrambled onto the bed frame, fumbling for my phone to use as a light. The screen illuminated just enough for me to see what was reaching for me, a small, pale hand extending from a crack in the floorboards. The fingers were unnaturally long, the nails worn to bloody quicks. As I watched in horror, more hands began emerging from cracks in the walls, from beneath the floorboards, from the ceiling, dozens of them, reaching, grasping. My phone rang suddenly, startling me so badly I nearly dropped it. The screen showed unknown caller. Against all better judgment, I answered. "Get out now," a woman's voice said urgently. It sounded like my grandmother. "It's starting to breathe." The call ended abruptly. As if on cue, I felt a subtle shift in air pressure. The building seemed to contract around me, the walls drawing inward by inches. The door to room 217 swung open on its own. I didn't question this mercy, I ran. The hallway outside had changed, grown longer and more twisted than I remembered. Doors lined both sides now, and behind each one, I could hear voices calling out names, pleading for help. I kept running, following exit signs that led me deeper into the building rather than out. The hallways began to pulse, the floor beneath me softening like flesh under my feet. The walls glistened with moisture that wasn't water. Finally, I rounded a corner and saw sunshine streaming through a door ahead, the side entrance I'd come in through. I sprinted toward it, feeling the building constricting around me, the ceiling lowering, the walls narrowing. I burst outside just as the sun dipped below the horizon. Behind me, I heard a tremendous groan, like a massive creature drawing breath. The door slammed shut on its own, and a terrible suction pulled at my back, nearly dragging me in again. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. That night, I packed my belongings and left Millfield. I drove straight through until morning, putting as much distance as possible between myself and that place. But distance doesn't matter. Every night since, I wake at precisely 6:17 p.m., feeling the air pressure change in my room. Sometimes I find scratches on my walls that weren't there before. Sometimes my phone rings with unknown caller, but when I answer, there's only the sound of breathing, not a single breath, but many, layered over each other. Last night, I found a small handprint on my bathroom mirror, too small to be an adult's. When I touched it, it was cold and damp. And now I understand what my grandmother meant in her final journal entry, the real reason they closed the sanatorium. It wasn't just Timothy Jenkins who disappeared. It was what they put into the walls to keep the building alive. What they fed it. Why certain patients were never released. The sanatorium is still there on Blackwood Hill, watching over Millfield. Local records show that despite numerous proposals to demolish it, something always prevents the destruction: equipment failures, sudden illnesses among the demolition crews, permit issues that vanish from records. Sometimes, on particularly still nights, residents of Millfield say they can hear it breathing. And sometimes, they report seeing a woman walking up the hill at sunset, a woman who looks remarkably like my grandmother did in her youth. A woman who, despite all reason, looks exactly like me. I've changed my phone number 3 times. I've moved across the country twice. But I know it's only a matter of time before I join her. Before I join them all. Because the echo chamber doesn't just echo fears. It echoes souls. And once it knows your name, you always answer its call.